going to go ahead and get started on our last panel of the day. My name is Celine Rodriguez. I'm the campaign director for our Secure and Sovereign Texas initiative here at TPPF. I'm a little biased. I'm from the border, and I've had the honor of working with all these guys to now call them my friends. So I'm happy to say that you are here for the most important discussion you will hear this week. So thank you for joining us today. Like I said, we have a wonderful panel, and we've only got about an hour for all of these gentlemen to speak to you, so I'm going to get right into it with who you have in front of you today. First, next to me is the Honorable Rodney Scott. He is a Senior Distinguished Fellow for Border Security here at the Foundation, and prior to that, he was the 24th Chief of the United States Border Patrol, where he served under President Trump and President Biden, and I don't think that ended too well, but I'm sure he's happy to be here with us today. I also want to note that Rodney Scott was promoted through the ranks, which is very important in the law enforcement agency. Next to him, we have the Honorable Thomas Homan. Tom served as he was appointed by President Trump in 2017 as the acting director of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. From 2013 to his presidential appointment, he served as the executive associate director of ICE Enforcement and Removal Operations. He is a 34-year veteran of law enforcement and has nearly 33 years of immigration experience. Next to him, I'm sure many of you have seen him in the news because there's absolutely nothing going on lately. We've got the Texas Border Czar, first ever Texas Border Czar, Mike Banks. He was appointed by Governor Abbott in January of 2023. He's a former U.S. Border Patrol agent. He served at the Weslaco Station, and he's also a former U.S. Navy veteran. And next to him, I'm very happy to have Chairman Ryan Guillen of the Texas Homeland Security Committee in the House of Representatives. He serves District 31 in the Rio Grande Valley. He is the youngest ever elected to the Texas legislature at 24, and he is a sixth-generation South Texan. Of note, he has been named Legislator of the Year, Best of the House, a champion for over a dozen times by numerous statewide organizations, and no other member has passed more legislation out of the House in a single session in history. Please welcome all of our panelists. There's a lot that you guys could share with us today. I wish we had more than 1 hour. We would keep you here all week if we could. But I would really love first Tom and then Rodney to set the stage. So there's two facets today that we're witnessing. You have a public safety crisis that every state in the nation is now facing. And then you have the mass immigration crisis coming across the border security crisis. So Tom, if you can tell us, how did we get here with the public safety crisis? And then Rodney, if you could follow that up, what happened at the border? What changed in 2021 that brought us here today?
Well, the fact is, we got historic illegal migration. So a certain percentage of these people coming across are criminals. They're gang members. They're carrying fentanyl. We get just shy right now, 2 million known gotaways. This isn't a guess. They're caught on video, drone traffic, sensor traffic. We knew almost 2 million people crossed the border and weren't apprehended, but we know they crossed. So why did 2 million people choose to pay more to the cartels to get away? Because you pay one amount just to turn yourselves in, right? Get processed, get released within a day, get a free airline ticket to the city of your choice, get a free hotel room, get 3 squares a day, get medical care, and end up with work authorization, which is the very reason most of them come, right? Why would 1.9, almost 2 million people choose to pay more to get away and not take advantage of that giveaway? It's obvious. They don't want to be vetted, they don't want to be fingerprinted. And these are your people carrying fentanyl. These are the ones sex trafficking women and children. These are your criminal gang members. And God help us, these are going to be the ones coming from a country sponsoring terror. Border Patrol has arrested over 340 on the southern border, almost twice as many of that northern border. They've arrested people from 181 different countries. Many of these countries sponsor terror. If they've arrested 242 on the southern border, how many of the 1.9 million came from countries sponsoring terror? So that's why we're seeing a crime problem, because we got the gotaway problem and we got historical immigration. We're ready to tell you, I think the last percentage of assaults, 18% of the average person arrested by a border patrol has past criminal history. Since Joe Biden's been in office, they've arrested 128 with a murder conviction coming across the border. If that's who they caught, what didn't they catch? That's why you see the criminal problem in the inner cities.
So I want to back it up and talk a little bit so people do understand how we got to 2021 and the border being completely out of control today, and it really is. I started my career back in the early 90s in San Diego, California, where the border was out of control. But over my entire career, I can pretty much tell you every single day, the border was getting more and more secure. And there were waves in that success. So when we were experimenting with border wall, putting that up, figuring out deterrence, how do you slow people down? Because basically that's how you make the agents more and more effective. That was over multiple different administrations. It was not just the Trump administration, right? Border Patrol refined a strategy. We actually had plans for where we're going to put in infrastructure, how we're going to leverage technology, but that strategy was evolving as technology evolved and as the cartels evolved. Because the cartels of today were not the cartels, it wasn't the criminal activity we were dealing with in the early 90s. They're so much more sophisticated now. So by the time, just short of Biden taking over as president, under the Trump administration, he had come to us and asked us, and again, this isn't partisan, it's just factual. He had come to Border Patrol, he had come to ICE and said, what do you need? How do we secure the border? He looked at our strategies, asked a bunch of questions, and then I explained it as basically put jetpacks on them and sped it up and said, we're going to do that faster than you thought. You're going to have my support. So we put in place a lot of measures that were making the border more and more secure. What that means is it reduced the flow. Why is that important? Tom alluded to it, but the cartels use the illegal immigration. They make money off of it, don't get me wrong, but that isn't their real intent. They need the mass illegal immigration so that they can overwhelm law enforcement at the border. And then the second wave, those gotaways we just talked about, and then sections of the border that aren't patrolled, it makes it easier for them to get away. Well, we were taking that ability away from them by securing the border, and then the agents that were being freed up, that basically the infrastructure freed up, we were assigning them to do deep dive interviews of people being caught across the border. Because there is no, and Tom and then I'm sure Mike will talk about this in a minute, there's no global database that has everybody's fingerprints in it. So when we run records checks on somebody crossing that border, that's a safety net that if they've been in the United States or we may have information on them, we'll know. But the real benefit is when a trained law enforcement officer looks another person in the eye and interviews them and then sanity checks the data they're giving you. That's how you find out who's a threat to this country. That's how you find out who the terrorists are, the criminals are. None of that is happening today. Our entire strategy was to slow down the flow. On January 21, the Biden administration, with about 5 minutes of them being inaugurated, came in and completely walked away from the deterrent strategy and started focusing on expediting the processing of people at the line. I'm sure this will come up shortly, but you'll see in El Paso, there's a little clash going on right now. In prior administrations, there would have been a Border Patrol response to deter that illegal entry. Under the policies of the current administration, they just let them pour across, process them, let them release them into the country. Every one of them does exactly what you would do. They call home and just tell their family, give them an update. And then that message spreads through wherever they live, the town and the city, that the borders in the U.S. are open, and another wave comes. And that's what we're seeing on the border today. And it could all be fixed by putting the policies back in place that were developed by career border security personnel under multiple administrations before the Biden administration.
Thank you so much. So before we jump over to the state side of things, Tom, I want to give you the opportunity to address something I know everybody here wants to hear. And I'll shout out to one of our coalition partners, Maria Espinoza of the Remembrance Project, which is the only national organization that serves as a voice for citizens killed by illegal aliens. And we've seen a lot of crime in the United States due to such an open and uncontrolled border. A lot of this comes back to rhetoric. When the president mentioned in the State of the Union the term illegal, that seemed to be the only thing the other side of the aisle was upset about after the murder of Laken Riley. So could you tell us, if President Trump gets elected again, are we going to see mass deportations of criminal aliens in our country?
I made a promise to President Trump when he comes back, I come back, and I will run the biggest deportation operation this country's ever seen. You know, the Washington, in my home office, the Washington Post did a story on me. That's like a little over 4 years ago. And the first line of the story was, Tom Homan deports people, and he's really good at it. So my wife come running downstairs and says, look at this, look what they did to you. It's a hit piece. I carved it out, I framed it, and it's sitting on my office wall. So look, and the media's going crazy, left's going crazy. That's a terrible thing to say. That's a racist thing to say. No, the law requires it, because what people don't, you can call them asylum seekers all you want, and I guess technically they are, but if you go back to 10 years of immigration court data, nearly 9 out of 10 people that claim asylum at the southern border never get relief from U.S. courts. They get order removal, an order deportation. So if those orders don't mean anything, then what the hell are we doing? Shut the immigration court down, take Border Patrol off the border, because there's no consequence. So yes, 9 out of 10 of these millions of people are going to be order removed. And mark my word, they will be removed.
I think it's safe to say everyone in this room will hold you to that, sir.
Bring it. You know, I get asked, my wife asks me, does it bother you that half this country hates you? No. I honestly don't give a shit what people think about me. Because if they saw what I saw in my 34 years on the border, they'd understand me. Look, you just mentioned the remembrance projects. I've met hundreds of angel moms and dads who've lost their children to people who are not supposed to be here. And you know, I know how many moms and dads I met that their children died of fentanyl poisoning. The criminal cartels in Mexico, because what Rodney says, have created gaps and they've overwhelmed the Border Patrol. They have killed more Americans than any terrorist organization, and that's why President Trump is going to declare them a terror organization, and we will take them out.
We'll come back to you in just a minute, sir. But moving on into the state side, President Biden said recently, I've done all I can do. Just give me the power. Give me the Border Patrol. Give me the people, the judges. Give me people who can stop this. I've got 2 great people in the state of Texas who are working very hard every day to stop this. So Mike, can you tell us, what is Texas doing? What are we seeing today? I know we just saw a disaster in El Paso, which thankfully Texas law enforcement got control of. So what are we seeing here?
So give me all of these things and I'll get the border shut. This is the same person that rushes to court to sue us when we put up infrastructure to keep people from entering the country illegally. So he doesn't want to stop this. A lot of people say that, you know, President Biden has no clue what's going on the border. This is by design. This administration absolutely has designed this. They know exactly what they need to do to secure the border. They have no intention of securing the border. There's a benefit in it for them. And so what the state of Texas is doing is we're doing everything the Border Patrol should have been doing. I didn't show up and all of a sudden start creating stuff. I did the stuff that we put together. Buoys, you know, Rodney Scott was the chief of the Border Patrol when they signed off on putting buoys in the water, the U.S. Border Patrol. New administration comes in and says, that's infrastructure. We won't have any of that, right? So, hey, thanks. Federal government spent all that money on design and everything else, so we took advantage of that and dropped it in there. Immediately wanted to sue us. They didn't sue us over whether it was us enforcing immigration or not. They wanted to argue that that portion of the Rio Grande Valley River is considered a navigable body of water for trade.
Which any of us who have been to the Rio Grande River
Right.
don't exactly see commercial ships going through it.
And so, in addition to that, we are building our own border wall. We're sitting at about 51 miles, either completed or almost complete, and we're continuing to move forward. We're on a course of about a mile a week right now. And you should know we're building that wall to the exact same standards that the Trump administration was building their wall. Why? Because it's cost effective to Texas, because we don't have to re-engineer it, we don't have to redesign it. We take what the federal government spent all that money on developing, and we're putting it to work. We're laying down tactical infrastructure. Tactical infrastructure works. You talked about El Paso. If SB4 was in place right now, wouldn't have been an issue. But listen, every single person that came across that river today and pushed past that wire, if they violated a state law, will be arrested and charged for that state law. We were able to get control of it rapidly with the soldiers and with the DPS we had down there. We were able to get it sealed back up. And right now we're going through all the footage to look at the different charges we can place on those. But we shouldn't have to. And the greatest thing if you watch any of that video about El Paso today, the greatest thing you'll see is when they pushed past the wire, guess what stopped them? The border wall. The actual border wall that was built held them back, right? And so every one of those people should be charged with 1325, in or without inspection, at a bare minimum, depending on what their record is, and should be amenable to a deportation, right? So we're going to do everything we can to keep them from getting into the Border Patrol hands, and we're going to do everything we can to discourage it. I will tell you this, not waving a victory flag, but I told the governor just today on a call, if he would have asked me to achieve what the state of Texas has achieved in the last year, I wouldn't have took the job because I didn't believe it was possible. With 23 years of working on this border, if you look at the numbers right now, the average daily entries in the state of Texas, that's entries, apprehensions, and known gotaways, is averaging about 1,100. The rest of the United States is averaging almost 4,000. So while we own 64% of the entire land border with Mexico, and the remaining 33, like she said, I was in the Navy. I took Marine for math. Whatever that remaining math is, 30-some-odd%, is crossing in Arizona, California, New Mexico because they're putting up zero effort and they're not doing anything about it. And so deterrence works, and we're pushing that traffic there. As a former career Border Patrol agent, I would love to see that deterrence across the country. But hey, I work for the governor. I'm in the state of Texas. And 75% of all border traffic now is crossing somewhere other than Texas. We're not satisfied. It's not good enough. We're going to keep pushing harder. We're going to keep laying down tactical infrastructure. We're going to keep building border wall. We're going to keep fighting in the courts. And we're going to keep pushing, doing everything we can to protect Texas. And we're going to charge with any type of law that they violate. We're going to charge it. And it's going to take them a while to get there. And hopefully they're felonies because, you know, if the Biden administration does its job, if you turn a felon over to the U.S. government, they're supposed to immediately deport them because they're a convicted felon. So,
Unfortunately, though, I saw the minibus was released at 2:30 a.m. this morning for anybody that was awake to read a 1,000-page bill. And they want to make it harder to deport. So there's that. Chairman Guillen, switching over to you, sir. If you know anything about politics, you know how incredibly hard it is to get a bill passed, and it should be that way. But when it comes to the safety and protection of our state, few people work as hard as Chairman Ryan Guillen has to ensure that people in the border communities and the rest of our state are protected. So one bill specifically I want to point out is your anti-human smuggling bill. It made it more difficult. It made a deterrent for people to smuggle. As someone from a border town, and I see some of my border friends here, we are tired of human smuggling. We are tired of human trafficking, so thank you, sir, for that effort. There was a lot of legislative wins, but there's a lot more work to get done. So I'd love for you to tell us, what is the legislature going to be focused on as far as border security in the state during the interim and moving into the next session next year?
Well, thank you. Yeah, so I'm from the border. I live in Rio Grande City. I live about a mile from the border. I have lived about a mile from the border my whole life. And you know, we've done plenty of things as we've mentioned already. But back in 2007, you know, about the mid 2000s. We started to see a lot of violence on the Mexican side of the border, and it frightened many folks living along the border. And in 2007, as Vice Chair of Appropriations and as one of the authors of the appropriations bill that year, we got $80 million to help secure the border, and it was the first time that the state of Texas invested in specific border security initiatives. And fast forward all these years, we're now at 6.5, 6.6, 6.7 billion for this biennium, a huge increase from 2007 when we first started. We passed some really important legislation this past year, including illegal entry, including the 10-year minimum for smuggling. We think that once we get some sentences at 10-year minimums, sentences out there for some of these smugglers, we think it's going to be a huge deterrent. But of course, the funding for all of the important stuff that we're using to help secure the border is very, very important as well. You know, we've got boots on the ground, more boots than ever. I think we got 4,500 guardsmen out there. We got over 1,000 troopers on the border. We're paying for local law enforcement to help us out with overtime pay and things like that. We've got air assets, boat assets. We've got wall, we got wire, we got buoys, we got containers, we got cameras. We've got buses. And I think altogether, we're doing as good a job as anybody in the country, as anybody has ever done in history. As our borders are mentioned, we're at a point in history, particularly since 2021, when we had a huge increase in crossings in Texas and throughout the country, as Biden created this vacuum. And we're now at a point where we're bringing that number down significantly. And it's without a doubt due to the many things that we've implemented, the assets that we have on the ground, the laws that we have in the books. And so one of the things that to answer your question, one of the things that I filed in the special sessions, I filed HB 127, I believe, and then it was 13 in the next special. But it's an effort to combine border security assets behind one force, and taking everything that we've got, putting it behind one force, and in an effort to make things more efficient, to make our efforts more efficient and effective. I think that going forward, that's going to be one of our big focuses. I think it's also important to mention that if we have a Trump administration, that perhaps we, at that point, we could pivot in different directions based on that. But if we're continuing the efforts that we've got right now, I think that's one of the bigger things that we're going to be looking at.
And thank you, sir. For those who are looking into those bill numbers you gave, that's the Texas Homeland Security Division, correct?
Yes, exactly.
So yeah, I encourage everyone to take a look at that and support it if you can. So going on to this panel is called a roadmap for border security. So now that we've set the stage, let's get into that. A big thing that we'll need to focus on is the messaging. So Rodney, if you could tell us, you've always been very clear about we have to separate immigration and border security. We saw, I believe it was Sheila Lee Jackson, who really tried to get you to say comprehensive immigration reform, and you were thankfully very adamant, we need to secure the border first. So can you tell the audience why it's important to separate that and what the difference is?
Sure. So from my perspective, by the way, if you take nothing else away from this conversation, please remember this part, because in my experience, this is the piece that has gotten people in the middle to actually understand border security and to vote right. And you can interpret that however you want. But border security is exactly the same as your home. Just think about it. Basically, you have a front door, you expect people to come to the front door. You don't expect people to enter your home without permission. Anybody tries to enter your home other than the front door without permission, it's going to elicit a response, right? Well, on the national level, it's the exact same thing. We have 328 ports of entry that are our legal front doors in the country where everybody's supposed to come in and out of. Instead of you making the decision about who's allowed in the country, you have voted for people in Congress that set those rules. And then CBP just applies them. Anybody, regardless of size, height, weight, color of eyes, nationality, that tries to enter the United States without going through an official port of entry, it's Border Patrol's job to stop them. By law, they are supposed to deter them and stop them from entering the United States. So here's the thing, that's border security. Simply having the capability and the willingness to know who and what is entering our home. That's border security at the ports and in between. So any conversation, and by the way, immigration policy and laws definitely affects our ability to have border security, because overwhelming numbers overwhelm the law enforcement capabilities, but it's a separate issue. So think about this for a minute. If you have no capability whatsoever to enforce a law, what use is having a conversation about changing that law? So when we talk about customs laws, which don't seem to be too politically challenging, or immigration laws, which get very hyped up on emotions, my argument is that conversation is completely irrelevant if you have absolutely no capability of enforcing that law to begin with. So let's talk about border security first. Let's get the capability to control, to know first, and then control who and what enters our home. And then once we have that established, I am more than willing to talk about immigration law and policy, because our country and the agencies we all worked for adamantly support and defend legal immigration. And our country is dependent upon commerce, which nobody wants to talk about, international commerce, coming back and forth across that border. But border security is just knowing and controlling what that is. All the other policy discussion is irrelevant without having that conversation. So I encourage you to share that with your friends or family that aren't necessarily in this room and totally on board with this conversation, because you end it with this: no border security, no nation. That's just how it is. If you can't control who and what enters your home, you can't protect your children, you don't have a safe home. It's the same at the national level.
And we're about 3 years deep in no border security, no nation. So let's see how much longer we have of that. Tom, back to you. There's a lot that ICE can do. There's a lot of misconceptions about ICE, though. A lot of people think it's just a big roundup operation of, racial profiling. We know that's not the case. So specifically, I'm wondering if you could tell the audience about the 287 golf program and how something like that or other tools within ICE could go towards cleaning up the mess of the last 3 to 4 years.
Sure. First of all, I just got a text from my wife. She told me not to swear. I'm supposed to apologize. I'm not going to do that, but I appreciate her paying attention. I just got it. She's the best thing ever happened to me. Look, 287G is a program that local law enforcement can join with ICE. We train them. We provide them equipment. And look, and it's a colorblind system. Anytime someone gets, if I get booked in any jail in the country tonight, I'll be run through NCIC. At the same time you get run through NCIC, you get run through DHS databases. If there's a hit, let's say you've been arrested by Border Patrol before, you have an ICE record or an immigration record, they notify DHS, which goes to ICE. So we say, okay, this guy's sitting in Travis County Jail. We've deported him twice. So we know he's there. So we issue detainers, asking them to give us 48 hours notice before we release him. We'll try to get there and we'll take custody of him. 287G program has been decimated by this administration. A lot of sheriffs out there are now calling themselves sanctuary cities, and they say, we're sanctuaries because we want the immigrant community to feel comfortable coming to police if they're victims or witnesses of a crime, and they won't do that if they think the police are working with ICE. Well, that's a bunch of crap, right? ICE don't want to talk to the victim or witness. We want to talk to the guy you locked in a jail cell. That's what we want. Let us in the taxpayer-funded jail to talk to the guy you locked up for apparently some reason. Obviously not a choir boy. He's obviously either a public safety threat or a flight risk. That's the guy we want. But the left has taken control of this language saying, sanctuary cities protect the immigrant community is simply false. Sanctuary cities are sanctuaries for criminals. We want the access to the criminal. And to say that it protects the immigrant community is nothing but a lie, because here's the facts. It puts the immigrant community at greater risk of crime. Because when they release that guy back in the streets, he's going to reoffend the very community in which he lives, the immigrant community. MS-13, that's all, they prey mostly on their own community. Second of all, it puts the immigrant community at greater risk of ICE arrest. Because if we can't arrest the bad guy in the jail, we're going to go community and find him. And when we find him, he's probably with others who are going to get locked up too. So it puts the immigrant community at greater risk of immigration enforcement. It also puts ICE officers at a great risk, safety risk, because rather than arresting the guy in the safety and security of a county jail where he knows he doesn't have weapons, now we got to go find him in his turf where he has access to whatever. Finally, I'll say, and I say this I've talked to many Democrats, congressmen that actually talk to me. I say, can you name one downside on a secure border? What's the downside of a secure border? What's the downside unless drugs come across to kill Americans? What's the downside unless women and children being sex trafficked? What's the downside unless terrorists come across the border? What's the downside unless Americans die from drug overdoses? What's the downside unless terrorists come across? What's the downside from cartels making less billions of dollars, right? There's no downside in border security. So I tell them, when you push the sanctuary city policies, I dare you, go to a community meeting, a neighborhood community meeting, and ask them a simple question. Would you rather have ICE in your neighborhood or in a county jail? They're going to say county jail because even though they're in the country illegally, which is a violation of law and it's not okay, A lot of them abide by the law while they're there. They care about their families. They don't want someone convicted DUI 10 times being released back in their community. They don't want a child predator being released back in their community. So it's a bunch of, it's just nothing but a false narrative to say sanctuary cities protect the relationship between police and the immigrant community. It puts the immigrant community at greater risk of crime. And the witness and victim of that crime certainly don't want to see that guy released back in the community. So under the Trump administration, we had a lawsuit pending with DOJ against sanctuary cities. It was going pretty good. First week Biden was in office, he told DOJ to drop that lawsuit. So now sanctuary cities are going across the board like you can't believe. So under the Trump administration, you can guarantee that 287G will thrive once again.
Good to know. Sir, you also are the CEO of an incredible group of professionals called Border 911. Can we expect to see under a new administration that ICE aside, all across his administration, we're going to see experts like your team on Border 911 advising the president on every facet of regaining control of the border?
Well, Border 911 is a 501c3, so I can't be political, and we can't, push any candidate. I brought who I think is the best border security people on the planet: Rodney Scott, Mark Morgan, who's CBP commissioner, Jason Jones, who's retired as the Texas TPS intel captain. He knows more about criminal cartels activity than anybody. Sarah Card, who's an investigative journalist for over 20 years. And Derek Maltz, who retired as the director of DEA Special Ops, who knows drug smuggling. I brought these people together to do one thing: go across the country and educate American people on what Rodney just said. It's not about illegal immigration anymore. It's about fentanyl. It's about terrorism. It's about sex trafficking. It's about record number of Americans dying. It's about record number of migrants dying. There's over 1,700 people crossing that border have died on this administration, which is an historic record. This administration is breaking a lot of records. None of them are good. They're killing Americans at record number, and they're doing. But as far as Border 911, I'm speaking that from Border 911, we're not supporting any candidate because we can't. I'm supporting educating American people on why border security matters, and that's what we're trying to do.
Thank you. Moving back over to you, Mike. Both President Trump and President Biden visited the border on the same day. They strategically visited separate parts of the border, but we saw a very different show of forces. I know when I saw one press conference, we heard a few times iterated, "This is war." And then when we watched the other press conference, I think he said, "Only Neanderthals don't believe in climate change." So we saw two very different shows happening, but a lot of people assume that if we do get a friendly administration in 2025, we don't need to worry about border security anymore. Everything's going to be magically fixed overnight. There's nothing else to worry about. Everybody go back to, living in a fantasy land. We know that's not going to be the case. There's still a lot of work to be done. There's still a huge mess to clean up. So if we do get a friendly administration, what are we going to continue to see from the state of Texas efforts?
All right, so before I do that, I want to back up a little bit to two things that I meant to address earlier when we were talking about everything that the state is doing, including the legislation. Right now, there are troopers and troops from 14 different states across this country that are on our border supporting Texas and fighting the illegal invasion, and they're paying for it out of their own state budgets because they understand now what we've been saying for years. Every state in this country has turned into a border state, so that's something else we're doing, and I wanted to make sure that I did not go without giving credit to those other states that are really helping out. And then sanctuary cities, the other thing was the busing program, and New York decided they were going to create a law where you couldn't bus migrants in, so we started flying them in because federal government gave them their travel pass. And you know what's funny? Every one of those sanctuary cities now are starting to scream about being sanctuary cities. So everybody wants to be a sanctuary city till it's time to do sanctuary city stuff.
I believe they're suing the bus company as well.
I'm sure. I don't know what for. The federal government gave them their papers to go anywhere they wanted to go in the country. We're just helping them get there. And we don't stop in Texas on the way. But going back to your question about the state being involved, and it kind of went to what Chairman Guillen said earlier when he talked about, having a department that we can shift our priorities to. The U.S. Border Patrol has been working side by side with Texas since 2007. The majority of the camera systems that are along that border have come from years of legislation from legislators like Chairman Guillen, and they're providing that information to the Border Patrol so they can react. The state will always be involved in border security because it's important to us, and we're not going to let any administration, manhandle us and tell us what isn't important at the border. The working relationship with the Border Patrol and those troopers and those soldiers out there is phenomenal, and they absolutely love what we're doing. The National Border Patrol Council doesn't go a day without thanking publicly what we're doing. The agents love it, and so we're always going to work hand in hand with them because of the criminals that come across. We just had to take a more proactive stance based on what this current administration is doing, and we had to be more hands-on. In the past, it was a lot of stuff, working together intel, working together with assets, doing narcotic interdictions, doing a lot of that. And we're going to continue to do that. We're always going to work with the Border Patrol. They are phenomenal. If you see any of them, if you run into any of them, pat them on the back and thank them because they're getting kicked in the teeth every day. Just imagine being handcuffed to the bumper of your vehicle and told, don't go do your job. Texas we've been involved in border security for a long time, and it's important to us, and we're not going to be out of it. Will we be in it at the level we are? I don't think we're going to need 4,500 troops if they secure the border. And then back to what Rodney said earlier, you've got immigration and you've got border security. They should not be the same. If everybody was pushed through a port of entry because they knew that crossing illegally was going to not give them that free trip, they were going to be deported, then they would push through the port of entries, and then the Border Patrol could focus on their primary function, which is the security aspect, and that's when you're going to go after your hardened criminals. That's when you're going to go after your narcotics. And one stat that this administration loves to bring up, and it's absolute, I'm going to take your wife's advice, and it's crap. And that is that you will hear that 90% of all narcotics seized by CBP are seized at a port of entry. What's not coming through? What made me decide I was going to retire before I was ever even offered this job was I got an email that advised me to put my remaining agents that I had assigned on the line into processing. I was going to leave 47 miles of border without a single agent. And as a commander of that station, I couldn't do it. So I said no. I told them not unless it was in writing and they understood the issues. They wouldn't give it to me in writing, and later they came back and gave it to me in writing. I said, well, have somebody else do it. I'm retired, effective immediately. And I went ahead and put my paperwork in. But again, we're not going to give up. We're going to be involved in it, and we've got to be able to separate immigration and border security. But we can't start talking about immigration until we get the border secure first.
And you mentioned SB 4 earlier. And you said we have to get the border secure first, which we all agree with. So, Chairman, I know you didn't author it, but you were a huge effort in getting Senate Bill 4 passed. And a lot of people here are wondering, what is happening with this bill? A lot of people are probably wondering, what is this bill? Representative Spiller and Senator Perry were the authors of it. I'm not sure if he's still here. No? Well, I want to thank them for their efforts on doing this, but huge effort. Basically, could you tell us what the bill does and why it's kind of floating in limbo right now?
Yeah, so, just like most of the things we've passed, the federal government has, there's been plenty of efforts out there to stop what we're doing. This is the illegal entry bill, and it created a state charge for illegal entry and gives the state the mandate and the authority to charge them for this crime, process them, and send them back to where they came from. And of course, we're in the court system right now, and there's been plenty of headlines here in the last couple of days about it. It's in flux, just like a bunch of other stuff we've got. Really good initiatives like our buoys, which I think would be a tremendous program if we're able to continue those efforts. But just like the buoys, we're battling out this effort in the court system, and I'm sure that as soon as we're able to move forward, we'll move forward. And I know that our state assets are ready, but I think ultimately, the important thing to note is that I think the message is getting down to these folks that are coming to this country, that are trying to migrate to this country. The message is getting down that Texas is putting a lot of barriers in the way, and I think that the numbers show that the message is getting down there, the message that it's probably best not to pass through Texas. It's probably a lot better to pass through somewhere else. I wish that we could do this across the country, but as a state, all we can do is try to secure our border. And I think we're doing a good job of it so far. We're headed in the right direction, and we just need to keep it going. Every time we come up with, and we'll come next session with more ideas as we have these good discussions. We'll come with more ideas and give ourselves more tools to continue this effort.
I'm so happy to hear you say that because I have a lot of ideas.
Yeah.
So I'll be in your office, sir. We want to go ahead and move on to Q&A before we have our closing remarks. So those in charge of Q&A, we've got one over here and one over here. Right here.
Well, first, thank all of you for all the work you've done, and we certainly appreciate all the effort. If we get a friendlier administration, I'd like for the panel to suggest a foreign policy. We haven't talked about what could be done from the other side of the border and what kind of pressures, we could do to kind of just stop it at a source point. And then also, as a Texas taxpayer, I'd like for us to be reimbursed for all this money that we've spent, and we could do something and spend it on water or some of our other infrastructure needs.
So I'll start. I don't know if anybody else wants it, but a lot of the things that we were doing foreign policy-wise in the last administration, even before, didn't get a lot of attention. So the first thing, the difference is put pressure on them. There's a lot of different levers that the federal government has. Even the state has seen it with some of the inspections you did at the border. There are many things you can do to get Mexico to actually step up and play ball. But we have to remember something, and it's not always easy to remember this. The cartels are like off the charts violent. And in this country, we joke or talk about corruption, but down there, basically the cartel tries to bribe the government officials, but if they don't take the millions of dollars or whatever it is, then they threaten to kill their family and their kids. So that's what we're trying to overcome. The last administration understood that business and risk proposition, so decided that we would come up with something that was beneficial to them to help us, and that was the 25% tariffs. That type of a threat got Mexico immediately to step up to the plate and start simply enforcing their own laws and helping us secure the border, and that made a big impact. But we were also working to set up asylum cooperative agreements with numerous countries throughout the Western Hemisphere. And basically what that did, think of it as a safe third country, but if somebody came to the United States and claimed that they were, let's say they came from El Salvador and they claimed they were afraid to go back to their own country under asylum, we were like, well, are you afraid of Honduras? Because we got an agreement with them, and were you afraid of it? And we were creating a whole list of countries, a menu of countries. There's no way they could be afraid of all of them to really weed out the fraud. But it all came down to this, the leadership. The executive in that White House basically told the State Department, told all the federal agencies, you're going to work together and try to solve these problems, and you're going to use the levers you have, foreign policy-wise, for the greater good of the United States. We're going to put America first, and that's what's changed. We could put that back in place overnight, but the specific levers are different depending on what those countries are. But I think we could do that overnight, and we could make a huge difference on slowing down the flow.
And so absolutely, Texas is going to do everything we can to get reimbursed by the federal government for doing their job. The only way to stop this from Mexico is to make it not beneficial. Mexico is charging every single person that crosses their country a peso to travel through their country. They travel through their country, spend money. By the time they're broke, they show up here with their hands out. We just have to make it less beneficial for Mexico, and they'll get on board. Mexico's going to do what's in Mexico's best interest, first and foremost.
I know we're pressed on time, but by the way, building the wall to the national specs, using the exact buoy system that I looked at, worked with the companies to refine, and then deploying that makes it a lot easier. I'm not making any promises, but it makes it a lot easier for the federal government to come in and say, yep, meets our needs, we'll pay you for it, take it back.
One thing I'll be pushing. First of all, let me be clear to the reporters watching this virtually in the room. Everything I'm saying on this stage is from Tom Holman, the citizen. And as ICE director and 34-year veteran of immigration enforcement, I'm not up here representing Border 911 because there's a lot of people out there saying I'm being too political with Border 911. It's a C3. I can't be political. I can't support administration. I can't support any candidate. So everything I'm saying on the stage, reporters, is Tom Holman, citizen. Nothing to do with Border 911. So take that and report that. They won't. They won't. Well, one of the ideas I think we need to push is what the state of Oklahoma is doing. We need to tax remittances. Over $60 billion last year went back to Mexico in remittances. People here illegally sending money home. We need to do what Oklahoma's doing. We need to tax remittances. That would bring millions upon millions of dollars back to this country. That would help with the reimbursement of border security.
So my question is for you, Tom. How do you see implementing that deportation effort? When I talked to the sheriff in our county, he said it would only occur, it wouldn't be a roundup. He saw it as being more when someone came into his jail and they were tagged as not being a legal citizen, they would be deported at that point. How do you see that happening?
No one's off the table. If you're in the country legally, you better be looking over your shoulder, first of all. It's not what the media portrays it to be. You know, concentration camps aren't being built. There's not going to be sweeps of neighborhoods. It'll be a targeted enforcement operation. You know, under the last administration, 91% of everybody ICE arrested where it's a criminal was either a convicted criminal or pending criminal charges. We always have to put the public safety threats and national security threats first. But the difference is no one's off the table. Now, can we remove 12 million people in a year? No, it's going to be a large, a long process. It's going to take a while. But one thing we can do, and I'm not a lawyer, and maybe the gentleman at the end can pass this legislation. And I'll be proposing this in the next administration, if it's the administration I support. When you're ordered removed from the United States by the immigration court, which 9 out of 10 of these people will be, if they don't leave, they go into hiding, and they're going to wait around for the next amnesty. Because we've proven over and over again, if you hide out long enough, have a couple of USC kids, no one's going to want to remove you. When I was ICE director, I get a call from Republican senators. Why'd you remove that guy? He got 2 USC kids. He didn't have 2 USC kids when he got here. He didn't have 2 USC kids when he's ordered removed, but he went in hiding and had 2 USC kids. Now he's immune? Because if that court order doesn't mean anything, what the hell are we doing? Spending billions of dollars in the process. So I think there should be legislation that once you get order removed, if you do not self-deport, you will never, ever qualify for another immigration benefit the rest of your life. That way, the U.S. citizen children can't petition for them. They can't apply for a work visa. They can't come in a visitor's visa. They won't be able to take place of any future amnesty. If we pass that, a lot of these people would go home in the hopes that their U.S. citizen children could petition for them someday, or they hope they can come in with a work visa or some sort of legal way. I think that needs to be a big part of the deportation process. Let the people self-remove, and they're eligible for other things down the road. I think that would be a dramatic help in this process. But won't be street sweeps. It'll be planned operations. We'll put the worst first. But no, I'm just saying this. No one's off the table. People, that's a hateful thing to say. No, it's not okay to enter this country illegally. It's not okay. It's a crime. And you shouldn't be comfortable walking around the United States saying, I'm here illegally. I know if I was in another country illegally, I wouldn't be comfortable at all. I'd be looking over my shoulder. I don't go 100 miles an hour down the freeway because I'm afraid I'm going to get a ticket. You know, I don't lie on my taxes. I don't want to charge tax evasion. It's not okay to enter this country illegally. And I think over the last couple of decades, people are starting to say, well, he's just here illegally. It's not okay. There are millions of people standing in line, taking their tests, paying their fees, doing their background investigation. They want to do things the right way. That's what we need to stick to. Rodney says, come in the front door. Don't sneak in through the window. If you're sneaking through the window, you're going to go home.
First of all, you know, I admire and respect greatly all the work that y'all do. And I know that the focus has been on the border, and we have a major concern about the cartels on the south side. But my question is about the cartels that operate already inside the state of Texas and across the country. And, you know, as you all know, they have a better distribution organization than Walmart, right? And what's being done to try to tackle the cartel problem on this side of the border?
Yeah, so, well, one of the bills we passed this last session is the RICO bill, and Senator Pete Flores and I got that through the legislature, signed by the governor this last session. That bill will provide the opportunity to go after cartels where it hurts the most, after their assets, after the foundation of what their the very basis of what is important to them, and it's money, it's assets. And I think that's one of the things, that's an example of what we are doing, and I think this is going to be a good tool to combat them. I'm sure there's other things at the federal level, but that's just one example.
I'll just jump in. Border security, national security, your local community's safety, it's a team sport. It always has been. So the first thing that happens from a border perspective when we start locking the border down again is those interviews I talked to you about. Border Patrol spent a ton of money building an intel system where we could take the information we got out of those interviews, dump it into a system, and then it does all the work behind the scenes, right? But it would basically track and help us map out all the cartels on the border and even the transportation pieces on the U.S. side. But here's the biggest challenge and one of the biggest problems with our current administration. It's destroying relationships. So when I was the chief of the Border Patrol, I had a great relationship, not just with Texas, but with all the border states, and we will share all the information we have about any crimes that are going on in those areas, and whoever has the best resources or the most access, you're gonna take action on that. It could be FBI, it could be a state or local, but basically the sanctuary city aspect and then this fight between the administration and Texas is hurting that. But literally, when you get a good administration back in power, that information sharing goes back into place and that team kicks back in. And as a team, we can make a huge difference on the cartel in Dallas, Austin, Houston, New York City, and Tamaulipas.
And so going back and mentioning it again, but the 10-year minimum, obviously these cartels, these Mexican cartels have big operations on in the United States and across Texas. And they have a bunch of smugglers out there that are United States citizens. They're Texans. And I think the bill that we passed to give 10-year minimums to these smugglers, as soon as we start catching them, and as soon as they start getting sentenced at 10, 15, 20 years, I think that's going to really put a dent in their operations.
Hi, this is just kind of a question about a subtle threat that I think has been coming over, and it's about maybe the new technology cartel is using with drones. Is DPS, are they equipped to counteract that threat coming over, maybe just harassing agents, that sort of thing?
So that was a capability that's currently been built out on our border and actually even away from the border. I would say the capability currently is limited. We had a plan when I was the chief building it out to not only to detect the drones coming across, but actually to be able to take control of them. I won't get into all the specifics, but they have a data recorder on them basically. So being able to take control of them and figure out where they've been flying from and what they were sending back is critically important. But I can't understate how many programs, enforcement programs, got shut down even when I was still chief under Biden, we had to redirect all kinds of discretionary funding to expedite the processing of illegal aliens. So everything CBP is doing today, there's a reason that I was against a couple of the bills that were proposed at the national level recently that even did add additional resources to Border Patrol. They were all being focused on expediting the processing and not solving problems. So the technology exists. Border Patrol's been testing it for quite a while, has some teams out there. And we need to build that out, but right now that's not a funded priority for this administration. It would be for the next administration.
And so under the state of Texas, we use some of the same technology that Border Patrol was using, the ability, to return them, making them return back to where they came from, also the ability to take control of them and land them, where we can then exploit the data on them. I'd love to be to take a shotgun to all of them, but apparently that's not the safest manner. But we do have that technology, and we're growing we speak. Our Texas Military Department has the second largest drone program in the state of Texas right now, and that is something they've been developing over the last year, and we're going to continue doing that because that is a huge threat, not just for the intel collection they use, but they're also using it for payloads. They've got drones out there now that'll hold 6, 8, 10-pound payloads, and they can fly, hard narcotics across, land it, and get it down the highway pretty quick. And so we know that threat, and we are fighting it daily.
Well, thank y'all for what you're doing to combat this crisis of epic proportions, especially our border czar here in Texas taking on this unprecedented role. My question is, assuming we get a friendly administration that decides to do the job of the federal government, what can the state do either from a policy perspective during the 89th or through the work of like a border czar to make sure we're prepared and have a safety net and infrastructure in place the next time an unfriendly administration decides to abdicate its responsibility to secure the border and enforce the law?
Yeah, well, I'd bring up, I guess I'd point out the HB 127, HB 13 that I filed during the specials, something that we're definitely going to be pursuing in the next regular session. I think that regardless if we go into a Trump administration, this legislation is something that will help us prioritize, strengthen, organize ourselves, and be more effective and efficient. And if we do have a Trump administration, yes, we might have to pivot on some of the things that we're doing to adjust. But I still think it's important that we have a very streamlined and efficient strategy in place. And I think that this bill and probably others that we're going to, that we'll come up with and that we'll work on going forward, will do so.
And I'm going to try to answer your question and add a little bit to the gentleman's question from earlier. You kind of look at it as a sinking ship, right? I'm going to bring out some Navy terms here, right? But you got to shore up those leaks first before you go fix the other problems, right? And so as we're getting more and more control of that border, you're starting to see DPS seizing more and more narcotics, right? And so it's allowing us to go do that enforcement because we don't need as much because we've got that area secured. Somebody asked us, why is the federal government fighting Texas so hard in that little small town of Shelby Park and Eagle Pass? And I'd like to cover this because I think it's really important. The cartel doesn't care what infrastructure we have on the north side. They need infrastructure on the south side. They need the rail lines, they need the airplanes, and they need the international airports. And so if you look at the 3 major locations where we had traffic problems, you go look at March of last year, it was El Paso. There was so many illegal immigrants crossing into El Paso that El Paso had thousands of unapprehended illegal immigrants walking the streets, committing crimes, and El Paso finally came on board with a declaration. So we went into El Paso, we shored that up. As we expected, it's like a balloon. You squeeze that balloon, the traffic moves to Brownsville. Brownsville had not seen the type of traffic it saw in April and May of last year since the 80s. And so you started seeing where they were seeing 3,000 to 4,000 a day. So we went over to El Paso, we repeated Brownsville, did exactly what we did in El Paso, learned from some of the mistakes we made in El Paso, got better, were able to shut Brownsville down pretty quick. That traffic then went to Eagle Pass. We rolled into Eagle Pass, and we started getting all this pushback from the federal government. We're going to cut the wire and let them in. We're going to damage your wire. And so we started putting our foot down. And the reason being is we had shut down Biden's last major area where he could push large numbers of migrants through. It's a fact. You can't push them through Big Bend. The infrastructure on the south side is just not there. Can't push them through Laredo. The narcotic cartel has too much control on the south side of Laredo and aren't going to let the attention get drawn to them by the human trafficking. And so literally we had shut down these 3 dams that the administration was using to help push these migrants through, because you will not hear anyone in this administration ever talk about stopping illegal immigration. All you will hear them talk about is how do we get them processed faster. As the chief said, they took that money away from investigation. They took it away from technology in order to, let's create a program that'll process these people faster to get them through. And so as Texas has really done a great job, and I'm not patting myself on the back, it's through legislation, it's through the soldiers, it's through the troopers, of really shoring up those major crossing points and getting us down to record low level numbers of crossings right now. It's allowed us to go focus on where the narcotics are winding up. It's allowing us to focus on more of the criminal activity. And that's never going to go away. That was really what Texas's job was on the border prior to this administration coming in. So should a more pro-enforcement administration come in, Texas is still going to be there. And much like Chairman Guillen said, we want a force that's flexible. We want a force that we can say, all right, we got this, we know how to do this, but we can shift and focus on this target or shift and focus on that target as they come about.
And if I could, I promised myself I'd do this before the session ended. I think it's a perfect place to do it. I lived in San Antonio, I lived in Dallas. So I spent about 10 years in Texas. Great state, I love you guys. But as a guy who's done this since 1984, I go around the country giving a lot of speeches about what's going on. And I hear a lot of people complain about Governor Abbott. He could do more, he could do more, he could do more. I just want to tell you from my perspective, done this for 34 years. No one's done more to secure this nation than Governor Abbott. Nobody. And people say, well, he can do, and I've had people in Texas yelling and screaming about it. Look, every ounce of fentanyl these troopers seize, they're saving thousands of lives. Everybody they arrest for criminal trespass, at least they're getting vetted, they're getting fingerprinted. There's one less getaway. So Texas has seized enough fentanyl to kill every woman, man, and child in this country twice. The state of Texas is not only protecting Texas, they're protecting the United States of America. This is a great, God bless Texas. You guys are saving America. You're on the front line. So I salute Governor Abbott. I salute SB 4 is rocking. I think that's making a big difference. So if Texas Public Policy Foundation, if you support them, keep supporting them because they're the tip of the spear of this fight. It's a great organization. But I want to say right now, as a guy who's done this 34 years, there's not a better man to secure this nation than Governor Abbott and what he's doing for the state of Texas and for the United States of America. God bless Governor Abbott.
I wish we had time for all of you to ask your questions, but we're going to have to go ahead and wrap up now. And one final question over to you, Tom. We hope we have a successful administration next year, but just in case we don't, we're going to be a little discouraged. So what is your message to our audience if we do not have a change in policy next year?
No profanity. Baby, I'll do this good. How's she even watching this? Is this on video or something? All right. Look, as corny as it sounds, I love this country. I've served it as a police officer, a border patrol agent, a special agent, an ICE director. I'm still out there fighting. We got the finest country on the face of the earth, but this America we're living in right now, I don't recognize. This is not the America I grew up in. And I wake up every day, everybody says, why are you so emotional on TV? Why are you yelling at Congress all the time? 'Cause I'm pissed off. I wake up every day pissed off because we handed this administration the most secure border in my lifetime. Doctors Without Borders did a study saying 31% of women that make this journey get sexually assaulted. They say our policies are inhumane. Let me ask you a question. When President Trump had illegal immigration down to a 45-year low, down 83 to 90%, how many women weren't being raped? When 90% less people were coming, how many kids weren't dying? How many Americans weren't dying from drug overdoses? How many pounds of fentanyl didn't get into the country? How many terrorists didn't get in the country? How many women and children weren't sex trafficked? Those policies save lives. They help to secure this nation. So I wake up every day upset that this president, I worked for 6 presidents starting with Ronald Reagan when I joined the Border Patrol. I'm old. 6 presidents. Every president I worked for, including Obama and Clinton, took steps to secure the border because they understood, as Rodney said earlier, you can't have national security if you don't have border security. This president in office right now is the first president in the history of this nation who came in office and unsecured the border on purpose. That's why I'm pissed off, because I'm telling you, while I'm talking to you all today, right now while we're talking, women are being sexually assaulted by the cartels. A child's going to die today. a child's going to be sexually assaulted today. So my message is, we got to secure the border. We got to have the right guy back to secure the border, or I don't think we're going to recognize this country for a very, very long time. I think there's so much damage now, it's going to take us a long time to fix it. If they get another 4 years, I don't know if we can fix it. So this election is important. And God, I want to say this. God bless the men and women of the United States Border Patrol. We got the only president and secretary in history who stood at the White House podium. I need to say, Secretary and the president stood at the White House podium and slandered the men of the Horse Patrol. They were found innocent in their investigation, no apologies ever given. These are the finest men and women in this country. I wore that uniform. I'm proud to say I wore the uniform. And despite what's going on in this country right now, despite the morale that's non-existent, these men and women get up every day, put that gun on their hip, put that Kevlar vest on, and stand on that front line. So at 3 o'clock this morning while you're all sleeping, some agent standing on a dirt trail someplace because the sensor went off, they don't know what's coming at them. Is it just somebody looking for a better life? Or is it a heavily armed drug smuggler? They don't know, but they're going to stay and take it on. So please, support the United States Border Patrol. Borders are, you're doing an awesome job. So I appreciate what you're doing. And again, I'm going to say this before I leave. God bless the state of Texas. You guys are leading the fight. I wish I was a Texan. God bless you all. And thanks for the TPPF for what you're doing.
Let's go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
You guys, and I'll close on this, you guys have gone through a lot of sessions while you're here, and they're all important. But I challenge you, there's not a single session you were in, a single topic that's more important than border security, because without the border security, everything else is irrelevant. But here's something else that's a problem. Too many times I feel like we have these conversations and it just stops here. You guys are already on board. So unless you take the information we shared with you, continue to get more information, and have hard conversations with your friends and family or your oikos, who you interact with, it's all for naught. We already know that you support border security. That's why you're here. But we need people to take a risk and have real conversations in their churches and their social groups and their communities to make sure that people that maybe don't really understand what's at risk actually understand it, so that what Celine just said about possibly losing this next election doesn't happen. Because there's a lot riding on this, but your kids' future, your grandkids' future is riding on this. So please challenge your friends and family on this issue. There's nothing more important than border security.
Thank you, Rodney. Go ahead.
I have to. So I want to say this. I can't fathom, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, never have been, but I can't fathom our country being able to withstand another 4 years of what's going on the border, much less the state of Texas. I mean, I don't put a lot of weight on anything Director Ray from the FBI says over the last 3 years, but even he is screaming and hollering. The only person in the United States government with any law enforcement experience that isn't saying we are setting ourselves up for an attack like 9/11 is the Secretary of Homeland Security. We cannot afford 4 more years of this. If you don't believe there are people out there that wish to do harm to this country, they just arrested an individual, Border Patrol. He admitted that he came in with the intent to go to New York and build a bomb, right? And he's Hamas. So we cannot do another 4 years. You've got to educate people, whether it's on the immigration side or on the border security side. Like Rodney Scott said, we've got to go out and convince those that we believe are unconvincible that our country is on the line in this election, and we've got to fight to defend it and protect it.
Growing up, my parents taught me that win or lose, you work harder. You win, you work harder. You lose, you work harder. There's always going to be a tomorrow, and we've got between now and the election, we've got to work harder, and however it comes out, we got to work harder. And so, I think there's a lot of optimism. I think that the country is prioritizing border security, and I think that if you look at polls and if you look at just even conversations that you have, I think that many people, including Democrats, agree with how Republicans are helping or trying to help secure the border, and I think that's going to make a difference in this election.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. It has been such an honor to be here with you tonight. Thank you for sharing your expertise, your stories, your experience with us. If anybody wants to continue to follow their work, please do. TPPF, we're very happy to partner with them, so I hope you guys all have a safe trip home and continue to do the great work you're doing.